Could I have your attention, please?
Also, please make sure the telephone for the board, I just would like to remind you of the communication rules. For the communication rules, if you would like to talk, please raise your hand. This includes those on Zoom. Do not use the little reactions. Raise your actual physical hand. This includes the little reactions to remove the files. So raise your actual hand. Once you're recognized, pause for 3 seconds, just count to 3, say your name, and then go on with your comments. Each of you will be called on as we go through. If there's multiple hands, you'll be told first, second, and third, and I'll remind you as we go through it. If there's any communication issue, hold up a fist. Even on the screen, just hold up a fist. That lets us know that there's some type of communication issue, and we can pause and fix the communication issue and then go on. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that we have our guest of honor here today. So if you all would come forward and we'll do the pledge.
I think it was about right here. Okay. Hold on just a second, sorry.
I pledge allegiance
See
to the flag of the United States of America.
hold on just a second, Aaron.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We certainly appreciate the fact that you take the time to bring those fellows over. We appreciate it. Enjoy the prom tonight. Okay. Did everybody, oh, my name is Sandy. Tanya will continue to remind me who I am. Did everybody get a copy of the agenda by email before the meeting? So everybody's got a copy. Do we have any anything you want to take away, add, or do I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Okay, Tammy made a motion to adopt the agenda.
This is Tammy. I make a motion to adopt the agenda for 2024. North Carolina Board of Trustees. Yes, for the minutes, well, not the minutes.
Okay, do I have a second? Jimmy has
I second.
second. Okay, do we have any discussion? If not, the agenda is approved. Did everyone get a copy of the minutes from April 9th, 2024? You had a chance to look over them and read them? Okay, do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Mickey?
I move to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Jimmy,
Jim-
I second.
Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay, those pass. Mark, you have some good news for us today.
Wait, just waiting for Ray.
Waiting for Ray.
Okay, yes, and thank you, Madam Chair. The good news is plentiful today. We are excited about the opportunity to host the 2024 high school prom tonight. The exciting thing about our prom is that it includes our 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders because we have a small number of students in our high school. So I know that they are excited about tonight, and the theme is the night of the diamond, and they asked us to wear red, white, and black. So that's why you'll see a lot of individuals with red, white, and black on. We celebrated the NCSD National Interpreter Appreciation Day on May the 1st. We also celebrated School Lunch Hero Day. That was on May the 3rd. This entire week has been Teacher Appreciation Week, and there have been celebrations throughout the entire week. And it's been nice to be able to see and hear about those. This is also National School Nurse Appreciation Day that was celebrated yesterday for NCSD. And then we know that we have an NCSD senior that attended the leadership camp and presented at the foundation. So lots of wonderful things going on at the school.
Good to hear. I hope the prom is wonderful tonight. I can remember those from the times that I was here. This is Sandy. I'm going to write that down so I can remember that. And if I forget, just come over here. Okay. But I can remember the prom, and it is always an exciting time, especially for the students. Let me congratulate all the teachers here at NCSD Teacher Appreciation Week. Man, what a job you do. And same thing for our School Nurse Appreciation. What a job you do. So glad to recognize all those folks. Mark, do you have some updates for us? Anything as far as the school goes that has happened since the last time we saw each other?
Yes. This is Mark. And we are excited about the NCSD graduation that will be held on Thursday evening, May the 30th. And that will be at 7 o'clock in Main Building Auditorium. We're excited that 7 of our seniors will be graduating, and 3 of whom have been accepted into a 4-year or community college.
Great.
So that is a wonderful percentage, and we're excited about that. Additionally, we have summer camp that will begin on June the 10th. And summer camp will run through June the 28th. And then, of course, we celebrated May Day and Founder's Day and had a beautiful reception outside. Got a little warm, but the kids really enjoyed sharing the story of Founder's Day and what it means, what May Day means to our school as well. That's my story.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Sandy, by the way. Very good. I'm getting better. Okay, I'm going to turn the discussion over to our legal advisor, Mr. Campbell. But as you can recall, on the last meeting we have named this now as the World Swirls. So get ready for our addition today.
Absolutely.
Mr. Campbell.
Very good. This is Chris. Good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you again. I come to you to provide you with answers to little to nothing. But I want to start off with something that I'll repeat several times. And Mark will help me throughout today with the presentation as well, is that there is a lot of uncertainty as to what the administrative managerial support from Raleigh will look like as of July 1st. That is still a moving target as to where will be the staff at all 3 of the schools get their administrative support. That is still being worked out right now as we speak. So there are not a lot of answers to that. What, though, is most important and is not an issue is that as of July 1, every employee of the School for the Deaf and the other 2 schools will be in the exact same employment position that they were on June 30th. That will continue. Everyone will continue to get paid. The paychecks will continue to come, and everyone, the manner in which they are employed now by the school on June 30th will continue on July the 1st. So there's a lot to be worked out, but a lot of it is at a higher level, if you will, a managerial director level, a board of trustees level. As far as the day-to-day workings of the school and employee responsibilities, those are not going to change as of July 1st. And I think we'll repeat that multiple times, that things will not look different immediately. It's more an issue of working through some managerial issues. So right now, as we speak, I've given the board a legal memorandum. This is a public document. I have extra copies. If anyone in the audience would like to have a copy to take with them, is fine. That basically the update right now is that pursuant to the current law, the trustees will become the governing board on July the 1st. We do not necessarily expect there to be an additional act from the General Assembly prior to July 1st. We were hoping there would be. We were hoping that they would provide some clarification prior to July 1st, but that is up in the air right now. Changes to the managerial support, administrative support of the school may not come until after or as part of the budget. And of course, the budget, everyone in the room knows, goes to the governor and can sit on his desk for 10 days. And then the governor can choose to veto the budget. And from what I understand, there may be some provisions in the budget that would cause the governor to veto the budget. And then it would go back to the General Assembly for an override of the budget. So that's why we are going to be kind of in a state of uncertainty as to the final managerial structure for just a little while. So that is still ongoing. And obviously that has made policy drafting and policy adoption difficult as well, not knowing what the issues are. And I'll cover that in just a minute also. But what I would like to do instead, because policies is next, is jump to the second page of the memorandum and ask Mark to actually tag team with me on this to make sure we answer all the board members' questions. But there are some legalities that I think need to be discussed as to what the reality will be on July 1st. So the first bullet is, I've already mentioned, the legislation permitting the Board of Trustees to take legal action does not take effect until July 1st, and any change is not anticipated prior to July 1st. So right now, the Board of Trustees does not have the legal ability or the legal responsibility, either one, ability or responsibility, to make final decisions on things such as contracts and personnel and other things until July 1. So that will not happen until July 1. And we'll talk about how that impacts your need for a board meeting in July in just a minute. Current employees all remain employed. Everyone who's employed under Chapter 126 as a state employee stays in that capacity of employment as far as job protections, job benefits, all of those things. And any employee employed under Chapter 115C will stay in that position as a professional educator with a professional license. The renewed employees is an interesting thing that have to kind of work through together. And that is that typically a employee with a professional license and a multi-year contract, that contract by law expires on June 30th, but can be renewed. Well, the school has always worked with DPI being the final decision maker, to hire to renew those employees. But my understanding, and it's reflected in the memo, is that typically the State Board of Education would not approve those renewed contracts until August or September. So folks would continue in an employment capacity, but their contracts weren't approved until August or September. If things don't change, then the school director will be working with DPI to identify the employees that need to have renewed contracts. But in my opinion, as an attorney, that ability to approve that contract does shift on July 1. So instead of those names going to the state board, they will come to this board. Is there anything, Mr. Patrick, that you want to add to that?
And this is Mark. And yes, that would be correct. And so, and the impasse on those is because those are 10 and 11-month staff members.
Mm-hmm.
And so their contract ends in June or July, and the new contract begins the first day that they come back.
Right.
On August 8th, which next year will be August 8th. So we will need to make sure that prior to August the 8th, hopefully during the month of July, that we'll be able to make personnel recommendations as well as contractual recommendations for approval for staff members to clearly understand that they actually are going to have an employment with the school.
This is Sandy, and this is for the Board of Trustees. Until we have the legislation in print, be prepared to go to an emergency board meeting with 48-hour notice anytime between now and July 1. And it will be by Zoom so that we can get everybody involved quickly and without reservation. Okay. And that's just the best advice I can give you at this time, because we just don't know when or how things will work out. So just be prepared.
And this is Mark. And the contracts for 115C staff are very straightforward. We have to follow state board policy. And so it's either a 1 year, a 2 year, or a 4 year contract. And so you just follow the policy, and that's how those are able to do. So the contracts are easy to do. They do just have to be approved. Yes.
This is Chris. That is correct. This is a very straightforward process. These are employees that have been reviewed and they're up for renewed contracts. It just requires a final approval by the board. So yes, I think that the best plan as we work through things today is probably to schedule a July board meeting, not knowing if we'll have legislation by July 1st, but as the chair said, be ready to convene upon 48 hours notice if we do get legislation prior to July 1st. Great. Next category is, and then we'll stop again, is new employees who are entirely new to the school after July 1st. As of July 1st, those will be recommendations from Mr. Patrick to the board. He will continue and the school will continue to use a hiring process, be that committees or however you've done that in the past. And he will bring those recommendations to you board members as after July the 1st for new hires. And some of those folks we anticipate right now would be 115C potentially hires, and then some employees will continue to be Chapter 126, which is under the State Personnel Act. So we don't anticipate a big change right now with any of that, but they would come to this board for final approval. The one thing I do want to stop, because I feel like part of my job is to anticipate obvious questions from the board members. And if I was a board member, my question would be, is there anyone who is a position that's absolutely essential to fill on July 1st that will be a new employee that the board should be ready to hire? Or do you think that there is not going to be that need to hire somebody brand new on July 1st? Will there be a little time for it?
And this is Mark. And actually, we only have one current vacant position that we hope to have hired before July the 1st. Therefore, any positions that would be hired that are currently vacant, we would not have a start date until August 8th. So there would not be zest with having to have those done, other than we need to inform individuals that they will begin it on August 8th. But any of our new teachers, they would all come in following state board ed policy, which is simple and easy. They get a 1-year contract. And then any of the classified staff members, we have some residential life trainers, and we have 2 EDAs, 2 teacher assistants that are currently vacant, and those would all have begin start dates of August 8th. We just want to be able to offer them a job, and so that will necessitate board approval.
So, go ahead.
Okay, this is Chris. So it sounds like that we would be able to have a scheduled board meeting in July to handle all personnel recommendations for the start of school for next year.
And this is Mark, and that would certainly be my expectation as well. Just one.
Yeah, this is Sandy, question. Now, I caught that you said you had one you're wanting to hire before July 1st. Now, is that an essential position?
And this is Mark. It would be a business office position, which we would consider essential. And it's a current vacant position that we've reclassified to offer supports to the business office. And it's currently posted, and we're hoping post it for 10 days. Worst, bring it down, set up your interview process, go through. That would not be one that we would have to wait, because it is a 12-month position. So we would be able to move forward with our typical process for that.
Okay, this is Sandy, just for clarity, for the board. So we would be the approving board on July 1. Is that what you're saying?
This is Chris. That's correct. And it sounds like that for the benefit of the board members and the school, that the administration is looking at hiring an essential business support person. But other than that, all new hires for next year, all contract renewals for next year will come to this board for approval.
And this is Mark, that's correct. As of right now, with our current vacancies.
Right. This is Chris. So I want to stop here because I know that personnel and how these contracts work is an important issue for everyone. So I just want to pause for a moment and see if any board members have any follow-up questions about how this will work. Ask now.
This is Sandy, and I do have on the agenda that, we will take legal questions from the board, but I think, anything that you have that is unclear to you at this time, with Chris here, we need to ask them now. Candace?
So this is Candace. I just want to be clear. That means if we set up a meeting in July, say July 1, for example, that would mean that we would come in, sit. Our first thing we would do would be look at the person who is being considered, and then we review that, and then do we announce that? Is it public?
Great question.
Is that, I just want to know what the process is.
This is Chris. That is a fabulous question. Thank you so much for asking it. So the way this will work is that the director will bring to you a list of personnel that they have vetted. They have done interviews here at the school. They have worked through a hiring process. That then comes to the board. Legally, the board is fine to rely on the recommendation of the administration. You do not have to see all applications. You don't have to review all the applications. You can ask and should ask as many questions as you need to feel good about the experience of the person and the decision-making from the staff. But that is the job of the administration, is to vet the individuals, to do the interview committees, and then to bring one person to you as the recommended person. They'll be happy to answer any questions you have. All of that is done in a closed or executive session because it's personnel, so that you can ask questions about folks. And then that will generate a personnel list. And so the director will bring you that personnel list in closed session. You will see every single person and every single position they're being recommended for. You'll have that opportunity to hear from your director, ask questions, satisfy yourself. Then that entire list gets voted on in open session, the entire list, not person by person, not name by name, but as an entire list. And the minute you vote on it, it becomes public record at that point in time. So there are a couple of quick takeaways from this. One is that the school will be setting up a secure portal so that you can receive confidential information such as personnel lists and other things for board meetings, because one of the jobs of the director is to get you information ahead of time. So something you will be used to seeing, maybe not for the July meeting, since it's the very first one, but going forward is a secure portal in which you'll be able to see who that personnel list is ahead of time. One of the things that I recommend is that if you in the future see someone on that list that you have concerns about or issues that you know about, do the director the professional courtesy of contacting him and having that conversation. Let him know what your concerns are ahead of time. I think we all know how democracy works. If an employee gets a majority vote, they're hired. But if you as a board member have a concern about a particular recommendation, please call the director, talk through it. He may have information that you didn't know that satisfies your concerns. You may have information that he didn't know, and he may decide to follow up on that information, may decide. So it is very much a conversation. The black letter law is recommendation from your director, you vote on it. But there is an opportunity to review it and to talk about it in closed session. Great question. Thank you for asking it.
Mary?
This is Tammy. My question is for the contracts for those positions, is that related to positions that would transfer? For example, there was a proposal of several different positions and some of those were transfer positions. Is this related to that or not related to that as far as the contract positions?
And this is Mark. These would not be positions that would transfer. These would be positions that are currently vacant.
This is saying, Mark, how many vacancies do you have right now? Just those that you just listed a few minutes ago? Is that all?
And this is Mark. Yes, we had 3 teachers retire. 2 teacher assistants retire. And we have 3 RLTs that have retired, but had 3 vacancies. So 6 total. Plus now the newly reclassified administrative assistant for the business. And that will be something that Ms. Leslie and I will put into the board packet. There will be a vacancy report that will be listed in the board packet as well. So you can, and Ms. Leslie does a nice job of adding notes of where we are with each vacancy.
This is Chris. So this is probably a good time for my benefit, as well as others. As far as the software that you'll be using, how will board members be electronically receiving information prior to board meetings?
And this is Mark. Once information is approved through me, then Ms. Tanya uploads it up into the Google Drive, which is secure. And that's how, and then they have full access to that. And she will develop base folders and all that kind of stuff, and one for each.
And if I believe it's still secure, I will share a link.
Who are
to-
you? Who are
I'm
you?
so sorry. I'm Tanya. Hi. I will share a link in an email because I know Google Drive can get wonky, so that you can just click on the link in the email and it'll take you right to those documents. You don't have to search for them. You don't have to wonder if something new is coming up. I will send you a direct email with a link so that you can have access to that, and it'll be clearly linked.
This is Sandy. I for one appreciate that.
This is Chris, and then this is for Ms. Tanya. Then how will the public be able to access the public portions of the board materials? Have y'all thought through that?
And this is Tanya. I don't know that we've gotten to the finish line of that, but I would assume that we could upload those under the Board of Trustees tab on our website. Would be my non-IT opinion.
And this is Mark, and that's what we were hoping, is we've got a Board of Trustees tab on the website, and it's all linked underneath there, and we were hoping that we could keep that same format, because most individuals have figured out where to go.
Right.
Yes.
This is Chris. That's fabulous. Yeah, that's perfect. That's how most colleges and schools do it. So that folks can not only see the current agenda, they can go see prior agendas and prior materials and kind of keep them moving forward. Wonderful. Okay, that is great. I want to pause again. Any other questions about employee approvals, contracts?
This is Jimmy. I wanted to clarify the vetting process. Who is doing that portion? That's something the Board of Trustees is doing? Or is that happen? Where's that happening? And how do we actually choose the applicant?
This is Chris. I'm going to answer the direct question. That is a job of the administration to do the vetting, the interviewing, and bring you a recommendation. And now I'm going to lateral to Mr. Patrick to tell you how they practically do that, how they actually do.
And this is Mark, and it's the same process as it always been. We always, for each posting, it's posted. When that comes down, the hiring manager chooses the candidates out of the list of names that have been referred to them that they would like to interview. And interviews are done through a panel, and that panel consists of a male, a female, a deaf individual, and an African American, to ensure that we're following all OSHR requirements. And we just add deaf part because we feel like it's important. And then that panel uses the a scoring rubric came to me. I needed it in my brain. A scoring rubric then for each individual that is interviewed. And then the individual that scores the highest is typically then recommended to me to approve for hire. And then, of course, it has to go through the long HR process of entering action into the computer. It goes up for approval, has to be approved, then it has to come back. So those will stay the same, but now I will receive a recommendation, and then I will bring the personnel report to the board. And then once I receive that personnel report back, and I will go ahead and approve the action, and it goes on up from there.
Where's the up?
Sam.
This is Sam. Where's the up? Who does it go to?
That's gonna, and this is Mark, and that will be an HR game that we're still trying to figure out. Because there has to be segregation of duties within the HR department. And we're trying to still figure out who's gonna hit the final button. Looks like it may be able to be me, but we're not 100% sure. That is something that you all are still trying to figure out.
All of it.
Yes.
Technical. Okay.
Yeah, this is Chris. So,
Put a name.
right. And I think it will help everyone to understand what's trying to be worked out right now. This is a great example. Is that currently the school is part of the Department of Public Instruction, part of the Department of Education, State Board of Education. So there are HR folks that have that final decision-making authority. As of July 1, this board will be under the direct governance of this Board of Trustees. So the state will not be responsible for approving your hires. Someone still, though, has to administratively make that happen in the state system. I call it push the button. Somebody has to be able to push the button. So one of the things we're working out is at what point does this board weigh in, and at what point does it then go to the state for the final processing, if you will, and the pushing of the button? And that's what's everyone's trying to work out right now. And we feel good that there'll be answers in time to do that. The other question I would have if I was a trustee is, well, what happens, heaven forbid, if a majority of the board does not support a particular recommendation? Well, this board does not tell the administration or the director who to hire or who to recommend, but if you were to not approve someone, then the director will go back and bring you a new recommendation. So that's new. That's not something that this school has experienced before. That is how community colleges work. It's how school boards work, that the superintendent takes the recommendation to the school board. If the school board doesn't support that person, then the superintendent brings a new recommendation to the board. That's exactly how that would work here. So obviously we would want board approval before the folks at the state level finalize the hiring process and push the button, so to speak. So you'll be before the button gets pushed. That's probably the best way to say that.
Wallace first, and then Candace second.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just wanted to mention that the point you just made, Chris, made me think of a need for an audit trail, really for the benefit of whoever the final button pusher is, that there's a paper trail of that the board of approval has been actually given as required. So just a thought. And it'll be new for our school, but I would think there's templates we can follow on how that's done at other schools or community colleges.
Would you want to answer that first, or?
And this is Mark, and the audit trail is already there. It's the system. Yeah, it's Fiore. Yeah. So-
And it has an ability to capture the documentation of the board approval. I guess that's the specific point I was making.
That'll be,
And this is smart, and while that would be new, it does have. NeoGov has an area in which that we can upload that up into those final systems that we have to use. And I was gonna say that I actually have been assigned 4 trainings that I am going to be taking. Actually, one is on Monday, that will then allow me, if the powers decide, that I would have that final approval. I would be able to have that final approval, so the button pusher will be me. If that decision is made.
This is Candace. First, I say good luck Monday with that training. God bless you. I have used NeoGov before, and it's very complicated. So I feel that it will be a struggle. It's complicated. Describing this process and what that's going to look like, it seems like there's potentially going to be a lot of delay in the hiring process itself. If we're waiting for this next step, and then we're waiting for the board to meet, and then we're waiting for this approval, and then if it were to be denied, then you're waiting maybe another month, and then, so I could see where maybe the actual hiring process would be really pushed out for that final approval for that individual. So how, from my experience working at Broughton Hospital, we want to move the ball quickly and, put a body in that position as fast as we can, but sometimes it does take 1 or 2 or however many months. So how can we make this a smooth process?
This is Sandy. I think that will come out of the final technical corrections bill. That was one of the major reasons we came to a board of trustees, was to eliminate all of that delay. So that if the school needed a position, came to the board of trustees approved, disapproved, whatever, it goes right back. I don't believe that will change, but it might. We're still in the world's worlds. But that was one of the reasons to bring in the board, was to cut out a lot of this delay in positions. Is that correct?
this is Chris. The legally and functionally or bureaucratically, I think, are the 2 issues, and you've identified a good question. Legally, once this board decides that someone can be hired, legally they're hired. It is the decision of this board of trustees. So in that respect, it's much more of a streamlined process that hopefully the director can bring you a name prior to their start date. You can approve them. That's all legally that needs to happen. The devil in the details is, as you say, the bureaucratic system and the software system with Chapter 126 or state employees. What needs to be done to process it? And I will tell you that one of the things that we'll be learning together, and I, as your attorney, will be learning from Mark, is we obviously represent independent entities. The state has its own attorneys. So I don't know, are you able to hire an employee that's going to be paid on the state payroll prior to certain things being done? Or is that a no-no? Can you literally not bring them on and let them start work until certain things are done? That's not a legal issue. That's unfortunately more of a bureaucratic issue of, will they cut the paycheck? Because I will tell you, there will be times, and these are one of the things we'll be working through. There may be times where you need to hire someone quickly. And I'll just tell you how school boards do that. School boards do that because they've given the superintendent the authority to go ahead and hire that person subject to board approval. And if the board doesn't ultimately approve them 2 weeks later, they still get paid for that 2 weeks. Well, that's easy in the school board world because they cut their own payroll checks. They don't have to go to the state to ask them to pay someone. Are you going to have that kind of flexibility prior to someone being approved in the state software? I don't know. Those are the kind of things we're going to have to work through.
And this is Mark and answer, no.
I figured it probably would.
Because best shared services controls that, and there are specific milestones that are met in NeoGov, then Fiore, and then best shared services does those approvals for at the state level for start dates. But we can work well here on campus and organize interviews appropriately and organize timelines to where recommendations can be made 10 days, for the board packet. And then hopefully we won't have someone waiting in the wings. There are always issues with setting up interviews but hopefully we can get the process streamlined enough to where we don't have a significant delay, but it could very well be a month. If we don't get an interview set up, of no fault of ours. Yeah. So that it would be individuals.
This is Chris. These are fabulous questions. So I don't want to stop. Does anyone else have a question about personnel, contracts, hiring? Feel good about it? Good. Okay. So then let's move on. It's the next agenda item. So with the indulgence of the chair, I'll move to the policy discussion. So with the policies, if you look at the first page of the memo, I've shown you, and many of you already know this, the structure of the School Boards Association Policy Manual, which we are going to try together collectively as a group to adopt to this school. And that is not a small task. The laws that apply to public schools in the state of North Carolina in small 10-point type are probably 3 inches thick, and the federal law is twice that. But you're not subject to all of it. You are subject to some of it. You're not subject to others. So there are going to be policies from the School Boards Association manual that make sense. There are going to be some that have to be modified or don't make sense. And you can see the breakdown by chapter that I've given you on the memo. The 1,000 series or the 1,000 series are overall governing principles of the organization. There are things like anti-discrimination, fairness in hiring, following open meetings law, public records law, things of that nature. The 2,000 series is the one you're really going to want to pay some attention to. That is board operations. So that is the series that some of that has legal requirements in it, but a lot of it is just how this board chooses to govern itself, how it chooses to enact policies, how this board chooses to interact with your director and your staff. So that's a real important section of the policy manual for you to pay attention to. Then the 3,000 series, the educational program, talks about curriculum, talks about a lot of the policies that relate directly to education, involvement of parents, things of that nature. The 4,000 series, we are going to have to spend some time on, and then I'll come back and talk about that in a minute. That regards students. And there are a lot of requirements that apply to regular public schools that you are being required to adopt. But as everyone knows, when it comes to students with IEPs, the federal law controls on discipline. So one of the things you'll have to get used to is you're going to adopt some state procedures because you have to, because the General Assembly has told you you have to, but you may or may not really use many of those because IEP teams are going to be making the decisions. And as we know, for a lot of disabled students, the behavior, I hate the way personally that it's called discipline and behavioral rules related to discipline, because for a lot of students, a lot of behaviors are part and parcel of their challenges, their exceptionalities. They're not misbehaviors. So the IEP team is always going to be the first entity to look at a student's behaviors to address those behaviors. The other thing that's going to relate here that public schools don't have is your admissions policies. Your admission, eligibility, enrollment policies, and your discipline policies will kind of go hand in hand a little bit because, again, you're going to have the ability to decide which students are appropriate for this school, which students can benefit from the additional services that you provide, and which students may not be able to benefit from the services you provide here as well. So that 4,000 series is going to be very different in the end for this school and the other two schools than it is for traditional K-12 or even charter school education. Then the 5,000 series talks about your relationships with outside organizations. So you can tell that one's not as critical to get up and going. Support services talks about your non-instructional staff and a lot of the things you're going to do in entering into contracts and things of that nature. The 7,000 series also, we just have to kind of put aside for right now because it's personnel. And we need to wait and see what the final legislation looks like for how we're going to do contracts and other things with personnel. The 8,000 series, we have to wait on. That's fiscal management. How is this school going to interact with the Office of State Budget and Management with all of their cash management rules, all of their budget creation rules? Mark is shaking his head, all of their budget approval rules. We're waiting on the legislation for that as well, too. So really, what I've been thinking a lot about this and trying to work through it because I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I will tell you that trying to take hundreds of policies and to take those policies and adapt them to this school is a really challenging thing for me to do and our office to do. And I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. So what we have done is we have sent you, and I believe it's already been uploaded to you. Well, no, my paralegal sent it to you. A chart, and if you'd like a color copy, I think Ms. Tanya can help you get one, of policies. And we took a first crack at identifying the 1,000 through the 4,000 series. And I should stop here very quickly and say that our law firm is representing this school and the Governor Moorhead School. And then another law firm from Raleigh, Pointer Spruill, is representing the Eastern School. So we divided the policy manual. They're working on the 5,000 through the 9,000 series, and we're working on the 1,000 through the 4,000 series. So what we've given you is a chart. And before we give you all the policies with our first round of drafts, I wanted to have this discussion first because I don't want to overwhelm you in what we're doing. My thought is that we would do this. We would give you just the policies electronically that we feel like you really do need to be ready to consider in July, at that July meeting. The ones that are required by statute, the ones that are essential for that July meeting. In addition, we would identify for you the recommended policies in this 1,000, 2,000 series of the board operations, your interactions with the director, and stop there for the July meeting. Let's try to just deal with policies that are required and the policies that talk about how you want to operate as a board. And this is one of the areas that I want you to be thoughtful about committees, okay? Committees of the board can be a very useful thing in getting the board's work done, especially when you have board members who do not all live in the same community. You can, though, in my opinion, and I've seen it play out from time to time, you can have too many policies. And you can actually inhibit the work of your staff and administration, because think about it, pretend you're the director or you're the HR director or the business manager, you're trying to keep up with 5 different committees. That's a heavy lift. And there is that trust that we talked about when we did the initial training. So this is one of the areas, though, where I think given the breadth of the policy manual and the time it's going to take to get you a final policy manual, a policy committee to work with Mark, I personally think is a great idea. For you to have a committee of board members that Mark can go through the policies, we'll obviously be assisting him with that, bring them in chunks to this policy committee, they can have the discussion and then they can bring it to the full board as a recommendation. That is the way most of the school boards that have converted to the School Boards Association policy, they've kind of done it through a policy committee. They can look at those policies and then kind of bring them forward. So that would be my recommendation, but that would be my recommendation after July 1st. Let's just look at the essential policies, the recommended policies at your July meeting as a full board, and then kind of structure how a policy committee can move forward after that. The last thing I'll say, I know I'm giving you a lot, but I'm going to stop and we can have all the discussion we need, is that if you will look at the recommendation in the memo that I've given you, look at the final page. The proposed timeline is just what I spoke about. Today, you're receiving the chart, and I'm happy to give you access to all the 1,000 through the 4,000 policies that have drafts. But again, I think it makes sense for us to segregate the essential policies and the recommended policies and get those to you. And then look at what I have here for possible meeting in July. It doesn't have to be the first week of July, but in July. You would take policy action on recommended policies. Then this next bullet is real important. At that time, you could ratify existing school policies, procedures, and handbooks consistent with applicable law and not in conflict with board policy. So in other words, you would be saying to Mark, if we haven't passed a policy yet, do what you've always done. You've been doing this for years now. You've got a staff. They know how to follow the law. We're kind of delegating to you that you are to just continue to follow current school policies and procedures as long as they don't conflict in some way with a board policy. So that's kind of a gap filler while we work through the policy manual. And I wanted to stop at this point and let Mark address all of us, including me, to educate me on, do you think that approach makes sense to you, that as long as there's not some board policy in July that says something different, you folks have policies and procedures in place that it makes sense just to keep following?
This is Sam. Before you speak, Mark, let me ask a question about dates. We had originally set June 25th as a date to look at these policies. Would that still be viable, or do we really need to wait until July 1st?
Great. This is Chris. We had set that June date thinking that hoping that maybe the General Assembly would give you some early power. We could continue with that date on just policy. And as I sit here and think about that, that actually makes a lot of sense, is let's keep that date for policy. And then your July meeting would be personnel. And that keeps everyone from being overwhelmed. Yeah, that's a great idea.
And then this is Mark. And to answer your question, yes, our current policy manual with the Education Services for the Deaf and Blind, I know that there will be a planned state board of ed meeting to sunset that policy. However, there would be no reason why we could not continue to follow those policies, certainly as what we have, as well as OSBN policy and OSHR policy. Because those are the three policy manuals that drive our daily operations.
This is Sam. Question to that. The policy manual that you shared with us was dated 2022, and you told us that it was outdated and not much good anymore. Is that the policy manual we're talking about?
And this is Mark. Yes, but that is our current policy. I mean, it is what we operate on as of right now. And it would certainly be an appropriate gap filler as needed. We've been operating it on it for all these years.
This is Chris. So I think just given the breadth and the uncertainty with the legislation, that I really think the gap filler makes sense. And so again, please understand that this chart that you have is a first draft. It's going to ask some questions and not answer some questions. I wanted to go ahead and give it to you so that you could have something to have. But what I would be doing, unless anyone objects, is after this meeting, I'll be following up with a smaller set of actual policies that I'll work with Ms. Tanya to get to you that would be for the June 26th meeting. And it would be, these are the policies, and I'll work with Mark on that to make sure that we're in agreement that, you know, those are the policies that are needed as well. Yeah, 25th. Yeah. Is there any objection to proceeding in that manner or any thoughts or questions?
This is Tanya, and I just have a question. Will that then be the first read of the policies of the June? Or, yeah, the June 25th meeting? Sorry.
This is Chris. These are fabulous questions. In the future, we will have 2 readings of policies. But my recommendation would be, now the board could certainly say on June 25th, you legally can adopt that set of policies on June 25th. By law, you do not have to have 2 readings. 2 readings will be a policy issue. And in fact, the policy you'll see on policy formation will say there are times that you might want to have an immediate policy implementation rather than 2 readings because of an emergency type situation. So no, we would not need 2 readings. So what I would suggest to you is that the policies you're happy with on the 25th and you feel good about, let's just go ahead and pass it. Or let's just go ahead and say that those will be in effect at your July meeting. Because again, you legally can't vote until your July meeting. So I guess that does, Ms. Tanya, answer the question. It kind of is a first reading because they can't vote. So yeah, so it will be a first reading on June 25th and then final approval when you get together in July. Yeah.
Okay. The other question I have is, should some wild thing happen and the General Assembly gives us a corrections bill before June 25th, then all of that would be subject to change, maybe.
This is Chris. So if the General Assembly were to pass a bill giving you the ability, for example, to adopt policies, my understanding is that would be the ability to adopt policies that still go into effect on July 1st. So that would change things only in that you could go ahead and take a vote on the 25th. That's a good question.
Okay. This is Sandy. Let me ask the Board of Trustees members, do you want to have a discussion about this? Do you want to make any recommendations? Do you have any questions of Chris about this? I mean, this is the time to ask them. Candace?
This is Candace. In the last 7, 8 months, yeah, that I've been on the Board of Trustees, been expected to review this and try to figure out, how we can, set up new policies. And so your work is absolutely thrilling. And so I thought that we would be quite in depth in this, going through rewriting, having to come up with new policies, from scratch, and have been overwhelmed in the last several months thinking that that was what we were going to have to do. So that being said, you're going to let us know that moving forward from here on out, we're kind of having a little bit of a hands-off in a sense that we're just going to be able to come to meetings, review what you're recommending as policies and say yes or no, or do we need to be involved in feedback, editing of policies, those types of things?
This is a good question.
This is Chris. Another excellent question. So think of it in 3 phases, if you will. The first phase is the July 1 effective date for this Board of Trustees and the legislation saying that you should have certain policies about certain issues. Those we're going to give to you and work on together at the June meeting. So that's phase one. It's kind of in and of itself because you're brand new. You know, most boards, you're not brand new. You're just looking at changing policy or adopting new policies. We're actually creating a brand new governing board. So that's why the phase one is a little different. We'll provide you with those policies, and we encourage you just to stay focused on just those to get the door open, so to speak, as a board of trustees, not as a school, as a board of trustees. So that's phase one. Phase two is then again, my recommendation is to form a committee that can work directly with Mark to now start going section by section after July to bring recommendations to the full board. So the full board doesn't have to think through every single policy. Because in my opinion, that's just not a good use of your time. In a smaller group, it works much better to review things. And then the last point is going to be real interesting for you is that, and all boards face this, sometimes policies are legally required, so you come up with one. And we have a lot of those that we're going to be working through. So you don't need to be involved in the formation of those policies because the General Assembly has already told us what those policies should say, okay? Then there are policies that are simply recommended and will be recommended to you of a way to tell your staff, the community, this is how we want to operate. These are what our ideals are and whatnot. And then the third issue is the one that you just have to be a little bit mindful of, and that is not everything needs to be in a board level policy. And that's something that all boards kind of struggle with, is what needs to be policy, what doesn't. And if there's not a statute that requires that, then it is completely up to the board. And there are going to be policies that I told you will originate from your administration. And there'll be policies that kind of originate from this board that you want. And that board committee gives you that body to ask all those questions. Is it legally required? Is it best practice? Do we really need it? Talk to the director about it and then bring a recommendation to the full board. So the roll up your sleeves work of reviewing policies, in my mind, would happen at the committee level rather than the full board.
Yeah, this is Tammy. So the working committee, is that a public meeting? When the committee does its work, is it public or no? Is it an open meeting, in other words?
This is Chris. Another excellent question. Anytime this board of trustees forms a committee, it is a public body. It'll have, the meetings will have to be noticed, and those meetings would be open to the public. Yes. And that is just like school boards, excuse me.
It is my hope, and what I would like to see the board do is let us set up these committees, board committees, and do it sort of like we had hoped to do it in the beginning, where there will be a board member that will chair that committee, second one that will help on that committee, and then hopefully Mark or the board can pull in some staff to talk about that, and we kind of divide that up to where everybody's not working on every policy. So is that feasible?
Yeah, so this is the second part of my question. So I noticed that the memo, has that already been sent out to all of us prior to the meeting? Or is that something that you handed out at the meeting just now, today? Because I didn't see anything, I don't have access to that. So I was wondering if that was sent prior to the meeting or if it was handed out today.
So the direct answer to your question, Tammy, is that this is hot off the press. It is literally something that I finished before I ran out the door for today's meeting. And in the future, I will endeavor to live by the same rules as everyone else and make sure that things go in the board packet prior to board meetings. I promise not to in the future. It's just that things keep changing day by day. And that's my excuse. But yeah, this one was just developed just today.
And Tammy says, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
And I do have one other question. This is Tammy. So could you send a copy of the memo, or could somebody send a copy of the memo? Maybe it's just me. I don't know if Wallace also got it or Nikki, but if it could be sent after the meeting, that'd be great.
And this is Tanya, and I will send out an email like we talked about with a link to the Google Drive. And all of the meeting documents will be on the Google Drive, and I will send you a link to that, so you will have it.
And this is Tammy. Thank you.
This is Chris. I believe the next agenda item was any other legal questions, and I'm happy to answer any other legal questions.
And this is Mark, and I have a kind of going back to the policies and the committees, setting up committees. Setting up committees relevant for if staff members are going to be involved. I want to be able to speak through that with the staff members. Are those staff members on recommendation? Are those staff members on outside entities? I'm just trying to make sure that, because I know there'll be questions about that.
Another great question, and one we might want to have a little discussion about. So the formation of a board committee, keep in mind, the reason is to make the ultimate decision of the board more efficient. So it's any group, you don't want to, again, I'm going to keep saying this, please don't form a committee for everything, because you'll actually end up, putting more work on your administration. It's to make the ultimate work of the board more efficient. The question is a wonderful question. It's not a legal question. It's a rhetorical question for you board members. On a case-by-case basis, who would it be helpful to have on the committee? Now, you certainly can say the committee is going to be the board and the director. And anyone that the director feels like from the staff should also be part of it or should come to the meeting, that is the director's decision to make. There's nothing inappropriate whatsoever about putting some staff members officially on the committee for the board to do that. It is completely up to you. So this is something, and this is why I'm also encouraging and telling you we don't have to make the decision today. I think that's a good thing. We've got our policies and our hiring for July already. We've decided how we're going to do that. So it's a question you're going to kind of want to think through is, do you want to appoint staff members or outside folks? Do you want to leave that up to the committee? Do you want to make the director a member of each committee, and with the direction that if he feels like there's a staff member that should be coming to the meetings and participating, that certainly they'll be welcome. Again, the committees, unless you give them power, have no power. They just bring a recommendation to the full board to lighten your load as a full board.
Yeah, this is Ray. I was just glancing through the policies 1000 to 2000, 2000 to 30 says the board and committees. They're legally required, and adopting policies that can be useful for the board and the determination to make committees as well. So I guess we really do need to develop committees and develop policies. Yes.
This is Chris. There's not the policy, and this is a great point of the difference between statute and policy. Statute does not require you to have committees. There's no law that requires you to have a budget committee, a personnel committee, a policy committee. It's up to you as a board as to whether or not you think that would be helpful, and then your policy will follow suit. So that's why it's a great example. These policies I've given you are just recommendations, and that's why I'm going to divide them into what's required by law and what's just a recommendation for you to think through. But no, you do not have to have committees by law.
Well, I just want to make a comment about board committees. And that is that many of us that have been appointed to this board of trustees do not know all the policies that have been involved in this school. And the manual that I have that was written in 2022 is very, very thick. It has nothing compared to what the policy manual I have from the state board. But the committees, I feel like that our board should have the opportunity to at least discuss these policies, not the ones that we're going to have to come up with in June, because they're already there. But the other policies, have they worked within the school? Have the staff ever had to use these policies? We have no way of knowing that. And to just have the administration come and say, okay, these are the policies we're going to use. This is what it's going to be. But it would be, I think it would be a good public relations with the school and the staff to be able to say, well, what do you think of this? Have you used this policy? Has it worked? If it works, you don't have to change it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So, and all of us come from different backgrounds, and I just think that that would be advantageous to us as a board, because you're talking about how can we make the work of the board easier. Just coming in cold, we may establish a policy that is foreign, and the staff will go, who wrote that thing? So it's really more of a working relationship, is what I look at it as. That's just my 2 cents. That and the nickel would be to a cup of coffee. So, but I don't think it's anything we have to establish today. I do think it's something we need to look at as we go forward, especially within the next year. I think that the lawyers have done yeoman's work in trying to get these policies together for us. No, it's not been easy. And you have to remember too, we are a residential school. So that's going to change a few things coming and going. So I'm going to ask again, do any of you have any questions for Chris concerning these policies and how they're going to be laid out? All of you good? Okay. You have more.
That is all I have. Oh, excuse me. This is Chris, Madam Chair. That is all I have.
Okay. I have asked Mrs. Sandy, you were going to call me. I have asked Chris to give us an update from the Attorney General concerning the school's case that is before them, just so you all know what's going on.
This is Chris. So we are in open session, and second, you are not entitled to know confidential student information yet because it is not July 1st. So that's why we're just doing a very brief update in open session. You do have one pending special education due process case, which means that is in the Office of Administrative Hearings to be heard by an administrative law judge. This school is being defended by the Attorney General's office and an Assistant Attorney General. I spoke to that Assistant Attorney General. He will be ready after July 1st to provide the board with a full update. That would be in closed session for student confidentiality reasons and for attorney-client reasons. But the Attorney General's office is trying to resolve that case, and they will continue to represent the school in that case to its conclusion. So that's the good news there, is there won't be any kind of difference or handoff or anything else. They'll be finishing that up. But there's a chance the case may be resolved prior to July 1st. If it is, then we'll provide you with a full update after July 1st. If it's not resolved, then that lawyer has agreed to Zoom in or come to a meeting and provide you with an update in closed session. So
Mrs. Sandy. Does anybody have a question for Chris about that? The best part of that I heard was they will continue to take care of it. It's not coming with everything else on July 1st.
Right.
Now, does anybody have anything that we have talked about as far as old business that needs to be discussed today?
The only thing that I have to represent NCSD as a whole is that as we continue to move forward with waiting to see what happens legislatively, well, we want to continue to stress the importance of that we still have no mention of any additional allocations of funds. And that has the school significantly concerned about viability and sustainability. And so any advocacy that can be done, that would certainly be something that we need to do, because without additional allocations of funds and operating a board and all of the new requisitions that will be coming down from business and finance specifically, just procurement alone, will necessitate significant involvement from your office. And we do have some concerns about that. We're not hearing anything about additional allocations of funds. We've heard about positions that's going, but we hear lots of different things, but we still hear nothing about allocation of funds.
This is Sandy. And that's what scares us to death.
This is what, and it should, because we are so significantly, so we would be so significantly short that the sustainability of the program wouldn't last just a few months. And we would need the majority of the annual budget. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. I appreciate the space.
This is Chris, and just for my education, have you been told that the current budget amounts will continue on July 1st? I mean, there's no turning off of the spigot, so to speak. It's the additional costs, the additional appropriation. Is that correct?
And this is Mark. And so we are hoping that in the biennium that our annual budget continues.
Right.
And there
That's
would be no reason why that it wouldn't. But it's the additional needs that we currently have that we simply would not be able to sustain over just a few months financially, and meet the sustainability needs of the students, campus, board, legal, etc.
Any other old business? This is Sandy. Just in case you forgot. New business. In amongst all of these woods that we're trying to get out of as far as technical corrections and everything else, this board of trustees is still required to give a report to the joint legislature in July. So this is what I would like to happen. Candace and Wallace, I would like for you all to do an initial layout of our next report. Right now, you really don't want me to do that. So I would like to have that back to me by June 1st. Then we will sit down and begin to go through what we know now, what we expect to know on July 1, and just evaluate how this has come to be. I think that's important in our next report.
This is Candace. So my question to Chris is this. So right now, if Wallace and I look at this, we start working, developing on a final report. Then I know that we've given other reports. We've already submitted several reports and we've heard nothing. We've had no feedback. So what's the point of our final report that's due? Is it going to influence anything? Are we going to, I mean, do we share complaints? Do we just throw things in there and it's just given? Or how can we make this final report, impact that?
Okay, the way I look at this final report, it will do us no good to talk about all the things that didn't happen that should have happened for the past 8 months. Because I think that the General Assembly is very well aware that what should have happened over the last 8 months did not happen, which is what's got us right here today on May 9th with no decision. So I think what we need to do in this final report is talk about how we foresee the school moving forward and what things we need to make that happen in a positive way. And I will tell you this, we need to stay away from asking for exorbitant amounts of money, because that's one of the things that has just blown this up, is the 3 schools asking for just money. And so if it's things that we can work on within or close to the budget we have, that would be good. We know that we have certain things that DPI was doing for the schools that will not be done again through them, but that still requires funds. Mark has told us that those funds are going to have to come from somewhere. So those kinds of things should be in this report. And if possible, we should look very hard at your projected budget for next year and see what that looks like. But that's what I would look at in this report. I mean, you can't go back 8 months and look at what wasn't done, but we can go forward and look about what we'd like to be in a year from now.
Did you recognize me? Okay. My question for this next report was whether there is in the legislation or somewhere else a template to follow, or are we just kind of starting from scratch, maybe using our last report as our starting point? Seems like we did kind of have a template to follow on the first report.
This is Chris Wallace. I will double check to see if there's anything that additional that was supposed to be added to this report, but my memory is, and Mark may know as well, no, there's not a template. I would follow the same kind of format that you've done previously, but I don't think there's anything specific that's supposed to be in this report that wasn't already in prior.
If we could maybe just get the, whatever the instructions are, just to make sure that Candace and I have those to make the first draft efficient. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, and this is Mark, and nowhere in House Bill 11 does it have any kind of requirements for structure or setup or anything. It's just, and this one, there are 4 things that we've had to do on the December and the March, and that first one is gone because we're not comparing to the DPI report this time. It's towards the.
Yeah.
So I think it needs to, in my opinion, from the school's perspective, the report should really hone in on what the school has left with needs. And we can certainly work together to identify what those are, but the greatest needs are trying to figure out the segregation of duties, which would require then additional staffing potentially, but we do not know that information. And then the monetary funds, and we have only asked for information, I mean, for funds that were for the things that we knew about. We know so much more now that we're going to be required to do that could potentially double the cost of what we've already asked for. And what we've already asked for has been alarming. But the original bill had no funds allocated, so there's no way to be sustainable with the requirements that are coming down. Just with the business and finance meeting that I was in today and the new responsibilities, they're making requests for multiple additional staff to accept the responsibilities and the even responsibilities that we don't currently have staff members with knowledge of how to do. And so current staff members are going to have to absorb some new roles, as well as learn new roles as well, and then potentially needing additional staff members on top of that once the segregation of duty decision is finished. We don't know how to move forward until that is done.
So the first report that we had done included the expectations and things that we were looking forward to as far as growing numbers of students as well, and kind of moving in that direction, allowing students to be admitted directly without having to go through a certain process. So are we still looking at having new students coming in the fall? Is that something that we can also show in our report, that we have this need because we are growing? We're a small school now, but we're growing our numbers and trying to garner some more support as far as staff because of those numbers. Is that something that we're still predicting as far as growth in the fall that would help with our final report and garnering some support for that?
And this is Mark. And as of right now, we have 7 graduates. And I think we have 4 new students so far that will be starting in the fall. So we're still going to be between that 65 and 75 number that we've been in for the last 10 years. So we cannot predict additional parents coming this way, or additional school systems making referrals. We're just excited about the growth in our elementary school. And that growth has been noted across the United States, most recently at the CEASD conference, where a lot of the school directors and principals that I had the great opportunity to meet shared that their elementary schools are growing as well. But we hope that that's a continued trend, because that's truly helping with the language deprivation that we have been experiencing in the past. But to be able to say that we are going to have a large influx of students, I wouldn't be able to answer.
This is Jimmy. I've got 2 questions. Maybe related, maybe this is new business, old business, I'm not sure. But since we're just having open discussion, who would be doing that observation of administration oversight? Is that something that we would take over July 1st, or how is that actually going to work? I was trying to read through some of Governor Cooper's stuff. I had just gotten the new budget recommendations, from the General Assembly. And so I was looking at that part, and it sounded like that's sort of a central office thing, but I'm not sure what that's going to look like moving forward and how that would work as far as the Board of Trustees.
This is Sandy. At this time, as best as I can tell, there will not be a central office. Although the governor did recommend it in his budget. But that is something that none of the three schools want. We've been there and done that.
So second question. Oh, this is Jimmy. Second question would be for legislation, which school or Board of Trustees of which school is hiring for advocating purposes? Who would have that role? I know Hugh Blackwell is our representative here in this area and is very supportive, but I'm not sure sort of the clarifying piece of legislation.
Clarify that more, Jimmy.
So again, I was reading part of what they were talking about, and they were talking about hiring, you know, legislation. Each school's going to have a representative or some sort of advocate or support for the school that's going to be in the state legislation. So I wasn't sure. I had missed that initially, and that just didn't seem clear to
that
me.
was
So
your
I was just
question.
wondering.
I think that came out of, this is Sandy. Mark, I think it came out of your question where you asked if we would have to have a legislative liaison. And right now, I don't think that's necessary.
This is Chris, was there some mention of that in the governor's budget?
Yes.
And this is
Yeah.
Mark. Yes, there was.
Because this is Chris, just
He's right.
for obvious political reasons, I would be not sure. We have to wait and see what part of the governor's budget ends up in the General Assembly's budget. So, just because of realities, you know, again, I think it's an obvious point, and I agree from everything I've heard that the central office idea that was in the governor's budget is not likely to come to fruition for the schools. So I don't know, I have not heard, let me say this, in the potential draft legislation that we've seen technical corrections over time, there's not been any mention of a legislative liaison. So.
This is Sandy. Everything that we have been given to date could change tomorrow. So until we get a document that says to us, this is the final draft of the technical corrections to State Legislator Bill 10, House Bill 11, we really can't answer a whole lot right now. Feel free to ask your questions. Chris can make up that.
And this is Tammy. So my question is, do we have anybody lobbying for us? Yeah, is there anyone there in Raleigh who is the lobbyist for us on our behalf?
This is Sandy. I will tell you that the three schools known as the three specialty schools in state legislature do have support. And the bill, House Bill 11, has passed. As far as I know, there has been no discussion of rescinding that bill. So as Chris said at the beginning of the meeting, we go forward with what we have at this point.
I think as far as having a lobbying entity there, we as a board need to be actively participating in promoting, the board and having somebody there that can lobby, specific policies, that can listen to maybe changes in the bill or things that are coming up and that can communicate between us and the legislature. If there's, educational bills going through or concerns, we as a board would need to know that. And I think having, a lobbyist in place would be good. I don't know that we have one, not that I'm aware of, but I still think that that would be something, maybe can we think about that as something we could do? I don't know. But also just to know what's going on with House Bill 11, I know there's a lot of other bills that could also relate to education. It's not just House Bill 11 that we would want to be aware of as well.
This is Sandy. The discussions that are taking place in Raleigh involve three very important people. One is to my left. But the lawyers are very involved.
This is Chris, and I can also respond to Ray, your concern that the School Boards Association maintains a full-time lobbyist, and they do monthly updates. And I would think that y'all are part of, that may be something you want to look at, because you get not only constant updates on what's happening with proposed education bills, but that also gives you someone to call if there's a specific concern, someone to contact if there's a specific concern on behalf of the school. So once you get up and running, what relationship you're going to have with the School Boards Association is probably an important administrative governance issue for y'all to discuss. That's a great way for you to stay up to date on what's happening in Raleigh and to have somebody to contact if there's a specific concern.
And this is Mark, and we will have our affiliate membership with the State Board Association that we will go into effect on July 1st.
Right. So this is Chris. They do a great job at the School Board Association of doing monthly updates of pending legislation, charts, information, who to contact, sample resolutions, and those kinds of things. So that's going to be very useful to you.
This is Sandy. On that note, one of the things that the lawyers have fought for, and I think will be a part of this, whatever comes out of the corrections, technical corrections, is that the Board of Trustees will be allowed to purchase liability insurance. Correct?
This is Chris. So the state of North Carolina, without going too deep into what is really a law school class all by itself, maintains certain immunities, governmental immunities, and certain of those immunities extend to you, but they may not always extend to you in your individual capacities if you were sued not as a Board of Trustees member, but individually. So one of the things that we feel very confident is going to be in the legislation is a specific provision that allows the school to purchase director and officer liability insurance that will cover all of you individually. So that you have coverage not only by virtue of being a government official, you also have coverage if you are sued in your individual capacity. It is not easy to sue a government official in their individual capacity, but it can be done. And I like to remind people who are worried maybe they're getting into too big of a liability issue. When you sit in this meeting and act as board members, you're acting in your official capacity. You've got lots of coverage, insurance coverage, governmental immunities. This is an added insurance policy to also make sure that you're covered if someone were to attempt to sue you in your individual capacity. And if you want my public service announcement, it's that you face more liability every day when you get up and get behind the wheel of your car than you do at any other time in your life, including as a trustee on this board. If you don't have an umbrella policy, call your insurance agent after this meeting, including everyone in the audience, and ask them about an umbrella policy. because that's where you face true liability this day and age. But yes, we're making sure that the directors and officers coverage can also be provided.
And this is Sandy. Chris and I have talked at length about this because I know your concerns. They've been heard, and that will be one of our first orders of business. Is to get that coverage and get that coverage in place. So does anybody have anything else they want to ask or talk about or discuss? I think one of the things we need to do is we have the policies meeting set for June 25th. One of the things we need to do right now is look at the personnel meeting that we will need to do in July. Do you have any preference?
This is Chris. My wife and I are taking a bucket list trip starting the second week in July. So we have other lawyers at the firm that can be here, certainly, but after July 8th, I will not be available till the end of July.
And I too will be gone the first week of July for a bucket trip as well.
Yes. So my partner Dean represents the Governor Moorhead School. So I would say don't schedule it if it is essential that Mark be at that meeting. But our office can provide coverage. So I would say schedule the meeting and I'll make sure you have a very good attorney.
Well, I'm thinking out loud. I would like some feedback from the board as to what is good for you all. July is a horrible month, which is why we kind of looked at skipping that month altogether. So give me some dates and availabilities, and then we will try to make something work out.
I would like to see if we could make a recommendation, since we are typically meeting on the first and third Thursday, since the first is the fourth, and well, we will be gone. Could we consider the 23rd, since that's kind of a typical day that we've got saved?
Talking about the fourth week of July.
Oh, sorry. The third Thursday is 18th. I spoke wrong.
How would that look for everybody else to be back from your bucket trip?
Fortunately, we will not be back yet.
This is Jimmy. This is Jimmy. I'm flexible. That works for me. July 18th works for me. I'm flexible.
Candace.
And this is Candace. The 18th, on the afternoon, that afternoon, I will be on a flight. So I can't get on Zoom. Can't do that afternoon, but it's up to everybody else, whatever everybody else can do.
This is, okay, this is.
Mark is signing 25th.
Well, about the 25th, that would be 1 month after our June day.
This is Sandy. Okay. This meeting that we're trying to schedule would be the personnel meeting. And they would they be working before this 25th?
And this is Mark. No,
Okay, then
the 25th would give us plenty of time to be able to notify staff of approval for them to start on the 8th.
okay, the recommendation is for July 25th. Wallace has his hand up, I think.
Hi, it's Wallace. When I raised my hand, I was going to say that I also have a conflict on the 18th, but the 25th or the 11th for me would work. If that works for others.
This is Sandy. Do I have a motion for the 25th?
This is Tammy.
Tammy's making a motion for the 25th. Jimmy's making a second.
Yeah.
Do we have any discussion? Did you have your hand up for discussion? Okay, all in favor of our meeting involving personnel on July 25th? Raise your hand. Okay. So done. Okay. We have a regular scheduled board meeting for August 15th. Do we still want to keep that meeting?
Jimmy shaking his head, yes. Ray shaking his head, yes. Yes, this is Ray. I think it would be good because that is right after the first week of school, or actually right before school. So I think if anything has come up or does come up, maybe that would be a good time frame for us to go ahead and meet.
Okay. This is Sandy. Let's leave that date on the table. It's like Chris said, it's always easier to cancel than it is to reschedule. Yes, sir.
This is Chris. Just for scheduling purposes, would it be smart to block off the third Thursday of every month for a potential board meeting?
I think we decided that at
Yeah.
our last meeting.
Okay.
Established.
It's been established. Is it the first and third?
Sorry, and this is Tanya. So the work session for the board will be the first Thursday of each month, and then the in-person board meeting will be the third Thursday of each month. And it'll be 5 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay.
And the work session is Zoom. So the first Thursday of the month is Zoom work session, and that's the one that you'll be in attendance for.
Good.
So this is Chris. So what I will do is I want to be very sensitive to legal cost and expense. So probably what I'll do is Zoom in, that's perfect. And then we can kind of make a decision if I'm needed for an in-person meeting or not. So I'll go ahead and mark off that first Thursday and then try to only come to the in-person meetings, not because I don't enjoy being with you, but say that again. The first Thursday.
The first Thursday is August 1st. So that will be a Zoom meeting, a work session, 5 to 7. Our in-person meeting then will be August 15th, right? And that will be a business meeting in person. Okay? Perfect. And then we will follow that schedule for the duration until something comes up we have to change. But please be advised that anytime within the next 2.5 months, we could be called for an emergency Zoom meeting with a 48-hour notice. That means all of you have to read your emails. We got to look around the table. I know. Anybody else have anything else they'd like to bring before the board? Okay.
This is Tammy. My question is about the in-person meeting. I'm assuming that Zoom will still be an option during the in-person meetings.
Any other questions? Any other comments? If not, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion. This is Jimmy. I move we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Second. Vicky. One comment before we do adjourn. I don't know if all of you know or not, but our board member there, Mickey White, has been extremely ill with a new strain of COVID that she just invented herself. And we do wish you well and hope you're back on your feet soon.
Y'all, it's bad. Be careful. I have never had my butt kicked like this before.
Okay, all in favor of adjournment? Raise your hand. Thank you all for everything. We're just getting into the. Thank you all for being here.